Hey y'all, welcome back to the Book Stamp. My name is Kate and today I'm going to be going through all the books that I read in the month of February. So this is going up kind of late because I think I read 14 books in February and I think 9 of them were from reading vlogs that I have not posted yet because I haven't finished all the books for them because I can't commit to a reading vlog. I'm working on like 6 right now. It's a problem. But I want to go ahead, wrap up all of these books. There are a couple that aren't for reading vlogs that I still want to really talk about. So those will definitely be getting a much more in-depth look compared to some of the other ones we're probably just going to gloss over because I have a couple reading vlogs coming out soon that will cover sort of a lot more in-depth my thoughts about a lot of these books. So we'll go ahead and get started with some statistics for the month of February. So again, I read 14 books for a total a little over 5,000 pages, which averages out to 370 pages, which is really close to my goal of 400 pages per book. I read quite a few chunksters this month. 11 of the books were considered own voices books, and I listened to audio for 53 hours. My average rating was 4.21, so I read a lot of really good books, like above a 4. That's really good. Most of the books I really enjoyed. There were only a couple that I really didn't like, so really good reading month for me. I read 6 audiobooks, 3 physical books, and 5 ebooks, quite a few ebooks. Most of the books were for adults with 12 and only 2 YA books. As for author pronouns, 11 books were from authors who use she pronouns, 2 were from authors who use him pronouns, and 1 was from an author who uses they pronouns. I read 6 contemporary books, 3 fantasy books, 1 poetry book, and 1 science fiction book. So definitely a lot more contemporary books for me, and I really liked, I think, almost all of them. And then I read from 4 Asian authors, 5 Black authors, 1 biracial author, and 4 white authors. So there's just a couple quick statistics, and then we'll get into the actual books. So the first book I read was The Mothers by Brit Bennett. I love Brit Bennett. Vanishing Half, obviously, such a good book. I loved it so much. And I'd heard a lot of people say that, like, controversial take, they liked The Mothers better than The Vanishing Half, which I can see that. I can see how certain people who like different things in books would like that. I still like The Vanishing Half better. I do. The Mothers was really good. I rated it 4 stars. It was just a masterful, like a masterclass in writing from Brit Bennett, the way she sort of used the narrative device of the mothers, the character relationships, how even though like it felt like at every turn, every character made the choice I didn't want them to make, I was like, no, don't do that, don't do it. And then they would do it, but there were always real world repercussions. There were always like real character stakes involved. It was so good. Also, this book just kind of dealt with different topics that I was not as interested in the way that Brit Bennett was talking about them, mainly being in this book abortion. It wasn't the most like pro-choice book you've ever read. A character does get an abortion, and it is a very realistic way of dealing with sort of the fallout emotionally from that, but to me it didn't feel like the characters always refuted as many of the like pro-choice narratives that were used in the book. And granted, the book was published several years ago. Our discourse has changed a lot since then, but it just wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy those parts of the book as much. I just found them not my cup of tea. But as for the character work in this book, absolutely phenomenal. And it was such an easy, like, consumable read. I wanted to figure out what was happening in these characters' lives. And so I would definitely recommend it, especially if you like Brit Bennett. Like, you gotta read all her books. So I would still put The Vanishing Half above The Mothers for me personally. Like, I would reread The Vanishing Half, but I probably won't ever reread The Mothers. That's just me. The second book I read was The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, which one of the prompts in the Reading Women Challenge this year is to read a book by Ogawa. And while this book was published, I think in like the 90s, it was actually only translated in 2019, I think. So it's really interesting that this book has so much like modern discourse right now when it is really an older book. And I think it's so interesting to sort of see the political themes comparing to life in the 90s to today. I'm not as fluent in like Japanese political discourse as I am in American, obviously. So I think that would be really interesting to like look at and see comparatively. But basically, The Memory Police is following our main character as sort of it's a modern dystopian type setting where the memory police basically remove different elements of life, and most people forget them. So like, say, like, what was one thing that like at one point roses disappear, so all of the roses are gone, everybody throws all their roses away, they get rid of all the rose bushes, but some people can still remember them, and so those people are like hunted by the memory police, and basically our main character ends up hiding one of her friends who is hunted by the memory police because he can remember all of these things. And so it's just this really interesting way the book is written, and it's so hard to describe like what the book is about, but the author, the main character is an author, and so she's trying to like write about the loss in memory, but she's also losing her memory. And so it's just this really interesting take on stories and how stories matter to us and the power of stories. So if you like that kind of thing, like, definitely read this book. It's a pretty quick read. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars and really liked it. The next book I read was Jade City by Fonda Lee, which, Jade City is so good. It's so good. So basically Jade City follows it's like a fantasy world set in a, you know how most fantasy worlds are set in Europe. This is set in Asia, and so there's basically these people called Jades who are able to control the power of like Jade the Rock, and they're able to like have super speed and super strength and all of these powers and are able to fight. And it's basically like this gang war between these 2 rival gangs, and we're following basically the main family of one of the gangs, and it's just beautiful in like mafia and like gang style political intrigue, which I loved. Like this like robust fantasy world, these like characters that were just really well done. There's real stakes, like people are dying. If you've been looking for a new fantasy series, like, this is one I definitely recommend. It is so good. I read the audio for the first one and it was phenomenal. Such good audiobooks. I'm actually reading the next one physically, which is Jade War. The first one is Jade City. The 3rd book in the series comes out later this year. I'm so excited. I literally cannot recommend these books enough. They're so good. The next 2 books were featured in my non-binary reading vlog, which were Mooncakes, which was a graphic novel basically following a witch and their romantic interest of a werewolf. And it was just so cute. There's like a whole mystery. It's one of the best graphic novels I've ever read. I absolutely recommend it. 5 stars. I talk a lot more about it in my in the vlog. And then I also read The Deep by River Solomon, which is basically about a alternate fantastical history of a race of people / mermaids who were originated when pregnant women sold into slavery were thrown overboard, and while the women died, their babies were born into the wine roux, which is basically this race of mer people. And it's just this really powerful story on history and understanding where you come from. And while it wasn't one of my favorites, I think I rated it 3.5 stars. It is powerful and beautiful, and I do recommend reading it. It's a novella. You can read it really fast. It's so good. The next book I read, which is also for a vlog that has not been posted yet, is The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This is a short story collection. So good. Made the short list for the Aspen Prize, which maybe you can figure out what I'm reading. But so good. Cannot recommend it enough. Just 5 out of 5 stars. I love the short story collection so much. Then I read 2 books for another reading vlog, which is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair and Laura Olympus, which are both Hades and Persephone retellings. One is a graphic novel and the other is sort of a new adult romance book. Both are really good. I rated them both 4 stars. That sounds like something that interests you. Go read them. Then I read The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deisha Phil, which is another short story collection that I just found absolutely wonderful. It is so good. The audiobook is phenomenal. Go read it. I read Black Sunday by Tola Rotimi Abraham, and it reminded me a lot of The Vanishing Half because it deals a lot with family and like interfamily relationships and how like dealing with a parent leaving you and dealing with religion and how that impacts lives. And it's set in Nigeria, I believe. And I think if I hadn't read The Vanishing Half, I would have liked it more, but I just wanted to reread The Vanishing Half after reading it. Then I read A Good Neighborhood by Teresa Ann Fowler, which is one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life. It is one of the most problematic, racist, sexist books I've ever read while trying to be woke, and it was just disgusting. Nobody should ever read it. Please do not read it. Mark it off your TBRs. Then I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which this book has been all over BookTube, Bookstagram, and I was like, I don't think it's for me. I don't think it's for me. It's not for me, y'all. Like, okay, y'all love it. Oh my gosh, this book is 5 stars. It's so good. Y'all got me with the BookTube hype. It got me, and I don't even care because it was so good. Listening to the audiobook, which has Elizabeth Acevedo as one of the narrators, like, it's just phenomenal. The way it deals with sisterhood. It's about sisters. Why did I think I wasn't gonna like this book? I love books about sisters. The sister relationships, the dealing with grief, the family, the way she uses poetry. I was blown away. I was blown away with how good this book is. If you haven't read an Elizabeth Acevedo, this is a great one to start with because that's what I did. I can't wait to read more of her work. 5 stars. It's so good. Y'all should have made me read this earlier. Then I read They Called Us the Enemy, which is a graphic novel basically telling George Takei's childhood growing up in internment camps in the United States. And I found this such an important story to be told while like people who lived through that are still alive, like George Takei. And I remember learning about it in school, but not as much because I live in the East Coast where it was not as big of a deal. Well, not as big of a deal, but it wasn't like as prevalent in my like society. So it's that much more detached learning that you get versus like I think maybe people on the West Coast did. But it was just so well done. The story was so well told. The way he wove in the historical implications of the decisions his parents chose, and like it was just so well done. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's really, really well done. I love George Takei, and this book just blew me away, honestly. And then finally, I read Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, which also I will be sharing my thoughts with more in depth soon, but I gave it 5 stars. It is just, this won the National Book Award, and it's just a phenomenal story. The way that Charles Yu used style and theme and syntax and like character was just blew me away by the creativity of it, the like how different it was than a lot of stuff I've read, the way he like pulled from film and movies and Hollywood. It was just so good. I absolutely loved it. So overall, in February, I had just a really, really good reading month. I read so many good books, got a lot of progress done on a lot of like lists I've been trying to read through. So overall, had a great month. So maybe I'll get my March wrap up before the end of April. Thanks for hanging out, y'all.